is 30%, it costs even less to call someone you love.
Well, she'll talk if Tom sings to her. Oh, my baby. Oh,
on weekends, you can call all across the country and visit 20 minutes for just $3.52 or less.
Talk to Grandma. Maggie! Did you hear that? No, she said goofball.
This is your TV station, 5TV.
Domestic peacekeeping. Coping with natural disasters. That's how we normally see the National Guard in peacetime. But now the Reagan administration is sending guardsmen to Central America, and that has touched off a major controversy.
And the real question here is, should National Guard troops be used to escalate the tensions in a very sensitive area? Should that escalation take place without any approval or debate by the Congress?
Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline.
Espinoza! Griffin! Larson!
Is the Reagan administration exceeding its constitutional authority by sending National Guardsmen to Honduras? That controversy tonight.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
On one level, this is a story about the National Guard, what their function is or ought to be. On another level, this is a story about federal versus states' rights. And on yet another level, it is a story about Central America and the fear that some people have that we may be slipping into an American military involvement there. It all came about because of a bill that President Reagan signed into law last November, an event that most of us in the media and most of you in the public never even noticed. The new law says, in effect, that if the federal government wants to send the National Guard on foreign assignments, even when there is no war or national emergency, it can do so, with or without the consent of a state governor. Hillary Bowker has more on the story.
National Guardsmen putting down a protest. This time, however, there's a twist. The demonstration is against the state's National Guard, or at least where they're going, Honduras. But the Minnesota Guard left and picked up a Nevada unit on the way.
It's going to be a pretty long trip from here to Kelly. We're going to refuel there. Minimum time on the ground at Kelly. So as soon as we get gas, we're going to take off again. About another 4.5 hours probably down to Pomarola.
In Honduras, some Guard are based at Pomarola, the only military air base in the country. Others are at a joint Honduran-U.S. base camp in central Honduras.
We are here as the second year of a 3-year phase training exercise for engineers and support groups building roads in Honduras. This road is not on the border of Nicaragua. It does not connect airfields. It is every bit as military road as a street in front of your house in your hometown that occasionally will have a Jeep on it.
They also repair ambulances and purify water. It all looks fairly harmless, but they're doing these jobs in the country next door to Nicaragua, next door to the Sandinista regime that the Reagan administration would like to see replaced.
Is this just a training exercise, or is this more than training? Is this a way to show the force to escalate the situation in that part of the world?
It's not the kind of work Guardsmen are doing here that has so upset some governors. They have no objections to similar exercises in other countries. What they fear is that the presence of Guardsmen in Honduras will in some way be linked to U.S. support for the Contras.
There's no association or affiliation between the Contra movement and the Department of Defense, and certainly not with the National Guard. We're here to train.
Training that has become vital to the national defense. The National Guard represents 45% of the Army's combat units and 27% of the U.S. Air Force combat units. What made the Guard's role so much more important was the introduction of an all-volunteer force after the draft was abolished in 1973. This year, the Guard will train in 58 countries.
When we started back in the Second World War, you had 44 months in some cases to train a unit to go overseas. Today, units are told you got 72 hours.
That puts a premium on the kind and location of training, according to the Pentagon's man in charge of the National Guard.
As far as I'm concerned, Honduras is the place where the best training can be received by our soldiers at this particular time, and I'm for sending every National Guardsman and reservist that we can into this region.
This year, only about 1,500 Guardsmen will train here, a small percentage of the more than 500,000 who serve in the National Guard.
A lot of times, like when we're in the States, we don't get to use our job skills like we're supposed to. And here it's putting us almost like in a simulated combat situation. So, I'm working with my machine there and, doing a lot of things I wouldn't get a chance to do at home.
Fear of a simulated combat situation becoming the real thing is what's bothering some governors.
The basic issue, I think, is one that we saw in Vietnam, that we saw with the sale of arms to Iran, is whether or not foreign policy decisions, and particularly decisions that go towards escalating tensions and possibly even war, whether those decisions should be made with a full congressional debate.
Last December, the Guard helped transport Honduran soldiers closer to the Nicaraguan border, where there was fighting between Sandinistas and Contras.
I have serious reservations about our policy with respect to the Contras, but I don't believe as a governor it's my role to object to the deployment of the National Guard under the circumstances that are involved here.
Well, I look upon the National Guard really as the nation's guard. I don't see the National Guard as a foreign legion, and I think the way they're being used, or they wanted to use our National Guard, was something like a foreign legion.
Congressman Brennan's disagreement with U.S. policy in Central America led him to stop a Guard unit from going to Honduras just over a year ago when he was still governor of Maine. Several other governors followed his example, and there were indications the number would grow. To stop what was becoming a trend, Congress passed the Montgomery Amendment last fall. It stripped the governors of the right to say where and when the Guard can train in times of peace. Governor Rudy Perpich didn't try to stop a Minnesota Guard unit that left for Honduras on January 23rd. But his Attorney General, Hubert Humphrey III, says the Montgomery Amendment is unconstitutional and has taken the federal government to court.
There is and always has been the right of the governors to determine in peacetime how their National Guards will be trained. And we believe that that still exists, and we believe the premise for that is in the Constitution.
So far, only a handful of states have expressed any interest in joining the Minnesota lawsuit. One governor who won't be joining in is Nevada's Richard Bryan.
If 50 states get involved in foreign policy formulation, we have an impossible situation in terms of responding to the national concerns.
The Minnesota Guard and their two C-130s are back in Minneapolis. Their training in Honduras over for now. The homecoming, unlike the departure, was uneventful. It's now up to the courts to decide if the governors can veto such training, but it's unlikely that ruling will end the debate. Hillary Bowker for Nightline in Washington.
Later, we'll talk with the federal overseer of the National Guard, Lieutenant General Herbert Temple, Jr. But first, when we return, we'll be joined by Minnesota Attorney General Hubert Humphrey III, who is challenging the administration's position on the National Guard, and by Governor John Sununu of New Hampshire, who supports Washington's right to send guardsmen to Honduras.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Kodak VRG Film.
Kodacolor VRG film that captures the color of kids.
We're all moving to a different rhythm. Our hearts beating to a different drum. We're what makes the whole world sparkle, and we're what makes the whole world fun. Don't you know? We're all part of the color of life.
Unsurpassed color in print film is here. Kodacolor VRG film.
The color of life.
Motor Trend Car of the Year, Thunderbird Turbo Coupe. Ford consultants
Jackie Stewart tells you why.
It's a rare combination of sophisticated engineering. A new intercooled turbo for extra power, computer-controlled suspension for ride and handling, anti-lock braking gives you surer stops. No other car in the world has all that standard. Thunderbird Turbo Coupe, Motor Trend Car of the Year.
Now with Ford's 6-year, 60,000-mile new car powertrain warranty.
Has it arrived in your home? The 16-page catalog from Homemakers East and Homemakers West. Look for the greatest furniture values you've ever seen. This sofa by Alan White is only $388. Real savings on Lazy Boy sofa sleepers. Brass and glass tables are only $99. It's all here at the lowest prices you'll find anywhere. Thomasville furniture, Sealy Posturepedic mattresses, Chrome Craft dinettes, Lazy Boy recliners. Buy now, no payments, no interest till May. Homemakers East on Hubble, Homemakers West on Douglas, Iowa's largest furniture stores.
Your Nissan dealer knows what really counts. The bottom line. Compare the bottom line price of our 5-speed hard-body truck to a comparable Toyota truck. And right now, get 3.9 financing or up to $800 cash back, plus $630 worth of options on all E-models. Absolutely free. Or get our 4-wheel drive Pathfinder for $700 less than Toyota's 4Runner. But don't wait and don't pay more. See one of these greater Iowa Nissan dealers today.
These people have something in common. All were ABC News Person of the Week. Friday we'll choose again, and who it is may surprise you. Watch World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
With us live now from Los Angeles is Hubert Humphrey III. He is Attorney General of Minnesota. And from our affiliate WMUR in Manchester, New Hampshire, the Governor of New Hampshire, John Sununu. Attorney General Humphrey, forgive me, but it seems like a lot of to-do about a very minor matter. I mean, so far, what, a total of 1,500 National Guardsmen from all states have been sent down to Honduras. Why not?
Well, you know, in this year of the bicentennial of our Constitution, when a Congress acts in a way which takes away an express right of a state and the state's right to be exercised by a governor, I don't think that's something that is just a small event. It's something that's very important.
Now, which right are you talking about? The right to have a state militia?
No, the right of the governors exercising their rights to determine the training of their militia. The Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution of the United States expressly gives the states, acting through their governors, the right to determine how that training shall take place.
Now, why has that never been a problem in the past?
Well, it's always been recognized by Congress. If you take a look at all of the statutes that have been adopted by Congress, they have always recognized the rights of the states, and as I say, it's an express right, and particularly of the governors, to consent to the training.
Well, let me turn it around for a moment, General Humphrey, because it's also, I suppose, been recognized in the past that, given all of that, the federal government still has the right to take these young fellows and train them where it will. And until a couple of governors started messing around with that and saying, yeah, but not in Central America because we don't like what's going on down there, it wasn't a problem, was it?
Well, as I heard in the beginning part of your show, the governor of Nevada mentioned that they didn't think that this was appropriate for 50 states to be into the foreign policy of the country. That's not the issue. The issue here is the relationship between the states and the federal government. Obviously, if the foreign policy of this nation requires that those individuals be there, then Minnesota is going to be there. But there's a way to do that, and there's a constitutional way to do that, and that's, of course, to federalize the National Guard. We have those statutes on the books. They are constitutional, and there's a way to act. My governor, Governor Perpich, requested that we take this action to ensure that our constitutional rights, the people of Minnesota's constitutional rights, and I would suspect the rights of New Hampshire also, are protected.
Well, let's go up to New Hampshire for a moment, and Governor Sununu, there's something a little bizarre going on here. Here is the grand tradition of the Humphrey family, a liberal family if ever there was one, standing up firmly for states' rights, and you're a good, solid conservative, as I recall, and you're saying, hey, if the federal government needs our troops, go ahead and take them.
Well, I support states' rights. One of the things that weakens the concern that states have for states' rights is when we make a mistake and try and establish states' rights in an area that is clearly a federal preemption, and that is foreign policy. And,
well, no, hold on a second. As I understand, prior to the Montgomery bill, prior to that, it clearly stated in the Constitution that the National Guard could only be taken by the federal government in the event of a national emergency or a war.
It still says that in the Constitution.
Okay.
The right to the states was actually given by federal law in 1952, 1953 in a much clearer way. My concern is that we had a good balance between the federal government and the states. I don't think any governor is really thrilled with the Montgomery Amendment. I obviously would prefer it not to be there. But what I'm upset at is that it has created a response in Congress that the attitudes of some governors has created a response in Congress that produced the Montgomery Amendment, and now the filing of this suit by Minnesota really puts us in a no-win situation. If we, quote, win the suit and it's declared unconstitutional, I'm confident that Congress will look for another more clearly constitutional route to deal with the issue of governors venturing into the foreign policy area. And if we lose the suit and it is deemed to be a strong constitutional position, we've given Congress one more tool to erode states' rights in the future. The fact of the matter is that although the governors are not thrilled with the Montgomery Amendment, continuing of this kind of an approach, I think, destroys what was a well-balanced and effective system prior to governors beginning to think that they ought to impact foreign policy by not letting the troops go to one area or the other.
Mr. Humphrey, in point of fact, you and Governor Perpich are not finding a whole lot of support among Governor Perpich's colleagues in the other 49 states, are you? I mean, you got 3 or 4, but there's not a whole lot of support.
Well, Ted, I think there's already 6 that have indicated that they will affirmatively be with us. There are others that are being discussed. The governors in their meetings before this amendment was adopted unanimously opposed the adoption of the Montgomery Amendment. And might I just say, I think there's a very clear distinction between the use of states' rights that had previously occurred back in the 50s when, as you say, perhaps a Humphrey on the other side was arguing the other side of the case, and this set of circumstances. Here we have the express language of the Constitution, and you have to read that, but the express language of the Constitution directs that the states shall have this right. This is not one of those rights in the 10th Amendment that's kind of reserved to the states.
Yeah, but
this was a relationship that was established.
But you still haven't answered the question is why it's constructive for us to file a suit that whether we win or we lose, we create a difficulty that is even more complicated than the Montgomery Amendment. And I don't see anything constructive in moving towards a policy that makes it tougher to establish a balanced relationship again between the states and the federal government.
I think the way you do that is be honest about what's happening. If in fact the goal of the federal government is to train these troops, then they can do that with the consent of the governors. But if in fact the use of these troops are for foreign policy matters to establish a presence of troops there, then they ought to federalize it and do it overtly.
Okay, gentlemen, hold on just a second, because we've got to take a break, and you've left us on kind of good point, General Humphrey, because we're going to talk to a man who can answer some of those questions, I hope. When we return, we'll be joined by the federal government's man who oversees the National Guard, Lieutenant General Herbert Temple, Jr.
We owe it to you. So we invite GM and Ford to follow Chrysler. You know, for 5 years, I've been feeling like the guy who sent invitations to a party and nobody came. Well, somebody finally showed up. GM and Ford decided the time has come to improve their warranties. Chrysler says, welcome to the party. It's good for America. Maybe that's why we haven't heard from the Japanese. Millions of Americans are only getting 2 or 3 year protection. What are they, second-class citizens? We've backed 5 million Chrysler owners with 550 protection. Our quality had to improve, and dramatically. So, the party's over. Chrysler announces the end of 550 and the beginning of 770, the best powertrain protection in the business. 7 years or 70,000 miles on the powertrain, 100,000 miles against outer body rust through on every Chrysler, Dodge, and Plymouth we build, car, truck, and minivan. Like I said, if you're looking for who builds them best, take a good look at who backs them best.
Yes, sir. That's my baby. No, sir. I I don't mean maybe. Yes, sir, that's my baby now.
Oh, baby, you.
Nobody but you.
Watch this roadshow video movie in your home tonight.
Thank you very much.
You bet. I'd been sleeping on a Big Sur waterbed for years. When I decided I wanted something a little firmer, I nearly made the mistake of going back to a conventional bed. Instead, I came back to Big Sur for a Hibernation Series premium firm.
When you're looking for added support in a waterbed, it's the Hibernation Series. Choose from 5 different degrees of flotation support achieved with different thicknesses of DuPont fiber. The Hibernation Series, available only at Big Sur Waterbeds, America's largest.
Oh, your shirt, it's wet.
Then let's hang it up to dry.
Next, on Dynasty. How much is this going to cost you in the long run?
By the time I'm through, it could cost a fortune, but it'll be worth it because I'll have Colby Coal and I'll have a Lexus.
You're so sure about that?
In 1 week, I'm going to own 100% of the most valuable oil leases in the world. And after that...
Weekday mornings at 11 on 5 TV.
On The Health Show with Kathleen Sullivan, detecting Alzheimer's before it strikes, plus how to stick with your exercise program, Saturday at 12:30, 11:30 Central and Pacific.
It's been 11 remarkable years. Tomorrow we'll say goodbye to David Hartman. We'll remember the early days, visit with friends, and share wonderful moments on Good Morning America.
Joining us now in our Washington Bureau is the nation's senior National Guardsman, General Herbert Temple, Jr. And you've heard what General Humphrey is worried about and what some of these governors are worried about. It is that you're making foreign policy with what they consider to be their National Guard.
Well, Mr. Koppel, the National Guard is a key element of our national security program. It's absolutely essential that the National Guard train in the same locations, in the same environments, and the same standards as our active components. One must keep in mind that there are thousands upon thousands of American servicemen deployed all over the world protecting the United States' vital interest. And it's essential that they be rapidly enforced by the reserve components of which the National Guard is a major contributor. That's why I believe that it's essential that insofar as the process to put American forces in those places where conceivably they may have to find themselves defending the interest of America, that we have that practice.
All right, Mr. Humphrey, it's very, very difficult to argue with that kind of thing. As I understand it, roughly 45% of our national defense is now in the hands of the National Guard. What are you going to do? Keep them in Minnesota, and then one day when they're really needed, they're not going to be able to engage in that jungle warfare?
I have absolutely no objection to what the governor said or what the general said. I firmly believe that. I know Governor Perpich does. Minnesota's National Guard will be ready and will be willing to help in any possible situation, and we will be well trained to do it. I think the general stated very expressly and stated well exactly what the Guard should be doing. The question is, if it's training, then why not allow, as the Constitution requires, the states to participate in that decision for training? If, in fact, though, the purpose of these actions is other than training, if it is foreign policy, then let's have the government of the United States make a decision. And if, in fact, it's a decision, then it should be national.
Hold on just a second, Mr. Humphrey, because I mean, what's going to have to happen here? Is the National Guard, is General Temple here going to have to enter into separate negotiations with 50 governors?
Absolutely not. In fact, not at all. If this, in fact, is the situation in which the foreign policy of this country is going to be directed in that area, then let's have the president make a decision and federalize those Guard troops. Otherwise, let's let Congress make that decision. But what Congress cannot do under the Constitution of the United States is enact legislation that removes the right of a state that is there in the Constitution.
But requiring that whole process of federalization gives less flexibility to the governors and less flexibilities to the state. I'd like to create a climate where the Montgomery Amendment is repealed by Congress.
Hold it just a second, gentlemen. Let me get General Temple into this, because these are his National Guard that well, maybe it's not his National Guard, but they're the troops that he's counting on. But we're talking about here. Go ahead, General.
Well, I think it's important that we perhaps review the bidding of the Constitution itself, because there's been a lot of discussion about what it says. And it says that the militia clause is that the states have the authority to train their forces. However, that's in accordance with the discipline prescribed by Congress. And Congress has prescribed that discipline, not only in this instance, but in previous instances, in those instances where it's important for national security. If one will go back to the Dick Act of the period of the early 1900s, where Congress exercised authority and precisely dictated how the National Guard would be trained. And then again in 1916, the National Security Act, and that was reinforced in 1933. So the Congress certainly has the responsibility and the authority to determine how the National Guard will be trained, and they've exercised that authority in this particular instance.
Let me ask you a more specific question then, General.
If I could just, Ted, if I could just reiterate, again, I have no objection to what the General is saying, but you have to look at the language. What happened in each of those instances, if I understand correctly, is that there was an express statement that the governors exercising their executive responsibility had the right to decide when that training would be allowed. That's what we're saying. We're not saying you train differently.
Let me get a question in here to General Temple, because if all you're concerned about is the training, you know you could train them in Panama, and none of these governors would even raise an eyebrow. What's getting them all upset is the fact that they're down there in Honduras, and they're just a few clicks down the road from the border with Nicaragua. That's what's really the fly in the ointment here, isn't it?
Well, to begin with, it's not just a few clicks down the road from the border with Nicaragua. It's a considerable distance, and I believe that your television crew was there with me several weeks ago to confirm that. But you must understand that the ability to effectively deploy forces that you deploy into those locations many times, which are remote to U.S. bases. It just happens that Honduras provides a unique situation, both in terrain and environment, for the training of our soldiers. And earlier in your own program, where there was discussion about the fact with some of the members of the forces were training down there. And they described the fact that they could not get that kind of training in the United States. And in Panama, the terrain and the environment is considerably different that you'll find in Honduras and the places where we're training our soldiers today.
All right, Mr. Humphrey, where are we going? We're down to our last few seconds. Where are we going now as far as this court case goes? You're filing what, tomorrow?
No, we have already filed the court case. We are briefing the court, and we will be making our arguments to the district court. One of the things I want to draw to attention is that we did not want, and the governor of Minnesota did not want to violate the law, so therefore he did not try and stop those National Guard missions. But what we are asking the court to do is to make a determination on the Constitution. And the general makes the point very well. The fact is that what's happening here is the United States of America wants to have a presence there. Well, if they want to have the presence, then they ought to do it through the legal matter of either federalizing the National Guard or using the Army Reserves or using some other force which they legally can do. But they ought, if they're going to use the National Guard, they have to ask for the consent of the governor.
General Humphrey, it brings back many warm memories of trying to interrupt your father. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. General Temple, you'll forgive me, but we're fresh out of time, and Governor Sununu, I thank you also. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. When we come back, we'll have a clarification of last night's program.
That'll do it. Who wants grapefruit juice?
I'll pass.
Good for you. It's great for dieting.
I know, but...
Lots of vitamin C?
Yeah, but...
But the taste? Here, try this. Ocean Spray Pink Grapefruit Juice Cocktail. It's tangy, smoother, sweeter.
This is grapefruit juice?
Uh-huh.
It's not bitter.
It's Ocean Spray Pink Grapefruit Juice Cocktail. And it's not just good for you, it's good. Ocean Spray good.
I can't get air.
Before and Afrin.
It worked.
For relief without drowsiness or jitters, Afrin's the spray doctors and pharmacists recommend most. Stuffed. Before and Afrin.
The tax laws are changing. The deductions on interest are changing. So maybe you should apply for a card that doesn't charge interest. The American Express card. Apply over the phone by calling 1-800-THE-CARD.
There's something so easy you can do for your health that you may not have thought of. Beautiful feeling. One of the healthiest things for you is a good night's sleep. That's why Sealy Posturepedic is designed in cooperation with leading orthopedic surgeons. Beautiful feeling. You feel so good when you're cushioned in comfort and correctly supported on a Posturepedic mattress. Sealy Posturepedic, because healthy is a beautiful way to feel.
Before you decide on which
which German luxury sedan best suits you. Just remember, the Audi runs in only the best of circles. If you want performance and handling in a German luxury sedan, you're ready for an Audi.
A clarification now. In last night's broadcast, we indicated that 2 publications we showed in this graphic were put out by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Their publishers asked us to make clear that they are not affiliated with the PFLP. And that's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
TV does have responsibility to cover all news fairly and to give the overall view of what is developing and what might be the end results.
I think that television coverage of the drought has caused the American farmers to form a bond.
Far more people get their news from television than get it from reading. The responsibility is very important.
We're all involved. This is your TV station, Fine TV.